We now return to Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute, the radio show discussing the honest truth about Illinois policy and politics. Here's AM 560's Dan Proft.
Dan Proft back with Austin Berg, writer for the Illinois Policy Institute, columnist for Illinois News Network on this edition of Illinois Rising. And Austin, I know Illinois Policy Institute has been a champion of food trucks, but in the city of Chicago, these food trucks that finally were allowed to exist. But I saw this week an ABC7 Chicago Sun-Times investigation, and your food trucks that you're so supportive of are running afoul of the law. Do you have egg on your face from one of those food trucks?
I can't say that it felt good to see the front page of the Chicago Sun-Times with a fat headline that said "Food Truck Frenzy," as if there aren't more important issues in the city of Chicago.
Sounds scary. Are we under assault? Are we under attack from these food trucks?
Well, it is a frenzy. So it's a huge spread featuring photos, by the way, of hundreds of people flocking to these food trucks because they love them so much, about how these trucks are these hardened criminals, these scofflaws, scallywags who, God forbid, violate traffic regulations in the city of Chicago. You know, kind of like an ABC7 news truck that might, park in a tow zone or something.
Right.
So, yeah.
So for one of those scofflaws, those scallywags you speak of, is Gabe Weiss, and he's the owner of Beaver's Donuts, and he's the interim head of the Illinois Food Truck Owners Association. Gabe, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate it as well.
Well, I know it's time to make the donuts, so we won't keep you too long. But I do want to understand the position of food truck owners such as yourself to the investigative story that was done and the suggestion by Alderman Riley, who took time away from Boss Bar to be interviewed by ABC7, understand the position that you guys are violating traffic laws and there needs to be a crackdown on what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for taking the time and asking me my opinion. I certainly don't think that there's any food trucks who believe they should park within 20 feet of a stop sign, 30 feet of an intersection. I don't think that there's any food trucks who advocate for breaking any of the traffic laws that exist in the city. But there is one simple step that would resolve this problem, and that's getting rid of the 2-hour time limit and the 200-foot restriction rule, which limits where food trucks are allowed to park in Chicago. So what the news piece last week highlighted, without really getting into the nuts and bolts or really the causation as to why this is happening, are some very strict regulations that are being enforced on the food truck industry, that have been enforced since day one, that limit where food trucks are allowed to operate and what capacity they're allowed to operate in. Because of those restrictions, there are quite literally only 2 to 3 areas throughout the entire city that are viable economically for the food trucks to succeed as small business owners, that are also far enough away from competing restaurants where they're able to abide by these rules. And that is the reason why you see all of these food trucks converging on the same areas in the same streets of downtown. Again, I don't think any food truck owner wants to be in a desperate enough position where they have to make a choice. Do I park in an area that I shouldn't so I can make enough money to earn a living, to feed my family? Again, all because of onerous rules that really do no common good whatsoever to serve the public. They don't protect the public health. The 200-foot restriction that blocks food trucks from operating throughout the city is really only in place to protect a few complaining restaurants that have lobbied successfully to their aldermen downtown to be able to have this competition away from their front doors. And it's really unfair, and it's certainly not the norm when you look at street food and how restaurants coexist together in virtually every other major city.
Gabe, I think you're giving beautiful context to this issue. And it's funny that the real important point is, so these restrictions were passed a few years ago. There's a reason they're not being enforced, and it's because they're ridiculous. Cops don't want to go around with a stopwatch timing whether a food truck is staying in a certain spot for 2 hours. They don't want to get out a tape measure and measure whether it's 200 feet away from a brick and mortar business. And this has real consequences. Basically, the Sun-Times reported on the back of its marquee investigation that Rahm Emanuel is going to, quote, blitzkrieg all of these trucks with tickets now. And that has real consequences for these guys. And I went down the day after that story was published and talked to a lot of them, and they said, this is basically either going to destroy my business or I'm going to have to reduce the people I employ by 60%, 80%. It's going to totally destroy this culture that people love. Gabe, can you talk a little bit more about what this would mean for businesses like Beavers, which people love, and other food trucks that are so popular in the city?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, my own individual small business story is a great example of food trucks, being able to be a stepping stone to sort of a larger audience and being able to grow a business effectively so you can add more economic good and economic impact. As you pointed out, I mean, these rules, when they were passed, they were passed, because of heavy lobbying efforts to basically impede food trucks from being able to operate anywhere in downtown Chicago. These rules have been enforced, but they haven't been enforced to the degree that some people feel they should. And what I mean by that is again, from the beginning, since these laws have passed, whenever there is a complaint, whenever there is an official from City Hall, BACP, or CDOT that notices a food truck parked for more than 2 hours or parked within 200 feet of a restaurant, they are going up to these vehicles, shutting them down for the day, causing that business to lose the revenue that they could make for that day, and forcing them to move. That is what happens 90% of the time, and that is a harsh enough penalty in and of itself. With the mayor making these comments that he's going to blitzkrieg the industry, really interesting use of words, blitzkrieg the industry with tickets, that effectively means that they're going to be doing the same enforcement that they've been doing, but they're also going to be levying $1,000 to $2,000 tickets on these small business owners who can't afford it. They're going to be making them take an additional day off of work, an additional day down from revenue, an additional day that they can't pay their employees, to go to court, to hire an attorney, and to be able to try and come to some agreement concerning the severity and the financial dollar amount of the ticket. So really, the impact from this is it will put people out of business. There are not many in this industry that can afford to substantiate a 2 days loss of revenue, a $2,000 ticket, and court fees and attorney fees. That one instance in and of itself can put many of these operators out of business. If you're talking about that on a regular basis, that's going to put virtually the whole industry out of business.
We're talking to Gabe Wiesen. He's the owner of Beavers Donuts food truck. And Gabe, let me ask you a question. I mean, I understand like a hack politician like Brendan Riley is going to do whatever his financiers tell him to do, and so for the moments during the day when he's sober, he'll go out and do their bidding. But here's the question. Are all the restaurants antagonistic towards food trucks? Because I would think there'd be a lot of restaurants that, just like you have restaurant rows and you have rows of bars, that bringing more people to a location that want to have lunch or have dinner or whatever, just like bringing more people that want to go have a cold beverage to the same place, benefits kind of the entire group of providers. And I wonder if some restaurants see food trucks as it's competition, but the idea of bringing more people to a particular area where my business is also located actually adds to my bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely. I know factually that is the sentiment of many restaurant owners throughout the city. I've been involved in the hospitality industry here for, almost 2 decades now. I've worked in it almost my entire life. There are many restaurateurs who, in conversations about this issue, are advocating for food trucks, are welcoming food trucks in proximity to their restaurants as a safe space where they can operate. My own story, the first place that we opened, the first restaurant that we were next to when we opened was Big and Little's restaurant, because the owners of that restaurant are friends of ours. They invited us to open in their parking lot to help us get our business off the ground. And it added economic impact to their business as well, because we were a new, trendy food truck on the streets. We helped bring some people in, to come see our business, and they would also go and get lunch or dinner at Big and Little. So I know firsthand that is the case.
And so like an ordinance like you had mentioned a couple times, 200 feet from a restaurant, that's just kind of arbitrary cookie cutter citywide, rather than allowing some opportunity for negotiation even among restaurateurs, whether it's a food truck or a brick and mortar place, and doing something that's cooperative and collaborative rather than having the government tell everybody who's going to be where and how it's going to run, and that may not be in the interest of either party. That's the great irony of this.
Yeah, I think that there's plenty of economists who've been publishing information recently talking about the impact of food trucks and these mobile businesses and actually how they are benefiting soft retail and commercial spaces. If you look at outside of the restaurant industry, the plethora of new stores that are opening, malls throughout Chicagoland, food trucks are being featured at those locations to help bring in customers. They are helping to add to the viability of those large brick-and-mortar commercial property locations. So food trucks absolutely have a direct benefit when it comes to bringing consumers to an area, offering cheap, affordable food options that allow those people to also see the other wares around them. It's very real, and it's happening not just in Chicago, but all throughout the United States and the world. Food trucks help the economy. They bring people to spaces. They employ people. They pay higher on average wages than any other restaurant. They pay property taxes. Every food truck owner that operates in the city legally has to be affiliated with a commercial commissary space. Those commercial commissary spaces where these trucks are home-based charge between $1,000 to $2,000 in rent on average. That directly coincides with that landlord's property taxes and the value they input on their business. So food truck owners pay taxes. That is very important. They pay sales tax. They pay the extra 1% Navy Pier metropolitan tax downtown. So food trucks pay 11.25% sales tax, the same as any other restaurant downtown.
All right.
So the argument that food trucks don't pay taxes is absolutely incorrect and ridiculous.
All right, Gabe Wiesen, the owner of Beaver's Donuts. I'm not going to stands anymore. I'm going to be looking for Beaver's Donuts downtown. Also, the interim head of the Illinois Food Truck Owners Association. Gabe, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it as well. Take care.